Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. So my name's Wayne. I lead our product marketing team here at Grafana Labs, and one of the other privileges I have is I get to chair our customer advisory board. And so our customer advisory board, these are customers that have been with us for a while. They really help us with our product vision, with our roadmap, and just give us a lot of insights on how do we be better partners for our customers. And today I have the privilege of having Frank and Neil join us from our customer advisory board. They've graciously donated their time to share a little bit of insights with you all, just about their journeys with observability. As we were preparing for this, I was trying to figure out a fun way to introduce them. I'll let them talk a little bit more about their business and their role and all that. But just to have a little bit of fun, so I found out that Neil, in his free time, I don't know if he does it as much anymore, but he was a passionate skydiver, right? So Neil has done over 400 jumps in his life, and he's still here with us today. So nice, Neil. Great.
Going okay.
When was your last jump?
Oh boy, 10 years ago maybe.
Okay, 10 years ago.
About
right.
the time my son was born. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's something.
So
there's correlation there.
Yes.
Yep.
And you're in the risk business.
I am.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. So you made a good calculation. Your insurance hasn't gone up. Okay. Excellent. So Neil is a skydiver, a previous skydiver. And Frank, as I've gotten to know Frank a lot, he started off telling me, okay, he was military. He's done a lot of really interesting things with the military. But his first job he was trying to get was actually just down the street here. He was going to Madison Square Garden, and there was a Barnum and Bailey circus performance there, and he was interested in becoming a professional clown. And so Frank, we don't have anything to juggle here. Maybe you can juggle the water bottles, but Frank is a pretty serious juggler, and he actually, this is also a fun fact, I didn't know this, but there's actually a clown school. And so, where is it, in Florida?
Orlando.
It's in Orlando, so the best, think of Harvard for clowns. So there's a college for clowns. Frank applied, but unfortunately got rejected.
I did.
And he had to go into IT and observability and all this other stuff. So
That's right.
Maybe in another life you would have been a professional clown.
Absolutely.
Yes. So excellent.
Actually, being in IT has been a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. So I think that similar jobs, actually.
Yeah. And congrats, by the way, Frank. Frank just got promoted to Chief Cloud Officer at Pega. And you could also say CCO, or Chief Clown Officer.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay, well, excellent. So just tell us a little bit about your role and your business for folks that may not know as well.
Sure. So, like Wayne said, my name's Neil Wilson. I'm a director of software engineering at LexisNexis Risk Solutions. My role really is I have a couple of teams underneath me that are really aligned to cloud engineering, site reliability engineering, observability, performance and automation, and some like the DBA type of function. So really, why some of that's important is we're just have completed a transition into the cloud from on-prem systems. So a lot of my last couple of years has been focused on getting all that stuff that was running on-prem, some of the legacy observability, and transitioning it to the cloud, and also then making the shift over to Grafana over the last 18 months. So, and Risk Solutions is a collection of different business units that ultimately we build products that help our customers identify fraud, make sure that they're in compliance with regulations and laws, verify that people are who they say they are when they're trying to, like, let's say, get an insurance quote. You don't want to be getting dinged for somebody else's bad driving record. So things of that nature. So a lot of our products are aligned to mitigating risk for our customers and making sure that that ultimately kind of trickles down to everybody else that's utilizing their services.
Great. All right, Frank?
Yeah, sure. I'm Frank Guerrera. I am the Chief Cloud Officer at Pega. For about, it's now almost 2 weeks now I've been in that role. That role really is allowing me to set up to really take the company into the last phase of what I want to do with Pega Systems. It's a 40-something-year-old software company, works in only the largest firms. We do workflow automation for the biggest banks, insurance companies, airlines, telecoms. So that's really what we are core to. It started out in the banking industry a long time ago, all on-prem. for many years. They brought me on board 7 years ago, and my title was the Chief Technical System Officer. So I had to build out all the architecture, the operations, the security, compliance, every aspect of a company that really ran on-prem software and transitioned not only the technology, but also the company to an as-a-service company over the last 7 years. That 7 years, scale was the biggest thing for us. Knowing that we had basically a lot of clients we had to move. We had $50 million in revenue when I started, with 5% clients on the cloud. It really wasn't a cloud, by the way. They called it a cloud, but it really wasn't. And then 7 years later, we're over $550 million in revenue. We have close to 50% of our clients on a cloud. We had to be able to scale, and a big part of it, of course, when we go and talk to clients, and I talk to clients in my new role, is really around two things they ask me right off the bat. One is around securing the data, and the next thing is how do we observe it? So that's a big part of what we do.
Excellent. All right, thanks, guys. Okay, so this is going to be a panel discussion, right? I've got a few questions prepared, but I definitely want the audience here. So we've got the QR code here. So if you have questions, please submit them. I'll start looking through them and start getting to them as we go through. Okay, so please submit your questions. All right, so the title of this talk is You Implemented Observability at Scale, Now What? Okay, so I think maybe similar to the folks in the audience, we've all been on different phases of observability in our organizations. And I think for you guys, it's been probably a lot of challenges, battle wounds, lessons learned along the way. I think you've all implemented observability for your end users, your organization.
Yep.
And trying to think about now what, right? So before we kind of get to the what's happening now and what's happening in the future, maybe you could just start by a level set of defining observability in your organization. So, it means a little bit of different things to different folks, but how do you guys think about that, and how does that matter to your stakeholders?
Sure.
So Frank, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like I said, it's the number two thing we get asked when we go meet with a client. So it's definitely paramount to operating any kind of cloud service, which we do. So, from my organization, it's really critical within what we consider the operations groups, definitely the cloud engineering groups that really build and also run all of the cloud services, is to make sure they understand how are we implementing the observability around to the ability to be able to be not only reactive but moving to proactive, which I'll talk about a little more in a minute. But the other thing that we really need to do in observability, which is when you're dealing with definitely engineering developers who are developing platform and product for the software we have to run on our cloud, we had to really make sure that they understood what they need to do to basically contribute to observability. And that really was the scale part, because we need them to get in line with making sure as they were building, we were implementing and understanding how we constantly had to evolve observability to make sure is really picking up the right things we need to pick up for how we're observing for our clients, how we're running the platform, how we're running the application. So it's definitely something that was very critical to the way we thought about from the beginning, how we're going to set up our cloud service, how we're going to be able to scale a cloud service, and Observer was a big part of it. We had a previous company before Grafana. We made a decision to look at a new provider. Now it's been a little while ago, but really, when we looked at it, we looked at every single provider out there, and Grafana was the one I really felt could help scale with us. And definitely, from my perspective in partnerships, is making sure we had the ability, and the reason why I like being on the cab also is be able to influence the roadmaps and understand what's coming out, which is a big part of scale too, from my perspective, and just having that ability to be able to have that kind of influence. So, yeah.
So, agree with everything Frank said, and kind of adding on to it. We're kind of in slightly different businesses, or we have different products that we offer to our customers. For us, we were in the middle of a cloud journey when we made the shift over to Grafana. So we're actually exiting some of our on-prem data centers, turning off the lights, disconnecting the cables, all those things. So we needed to be successful in moving to the cloud, and we realized that we needed a better observability platform in place than what we had at the time. That's where Grafana came in, and we made a pretty rapid shift. So for us, we went from having no Grafana footprint of any discernible size to having a large centralized Grafana cloud-hosted services for most of it in about 18 months' time. So January of last year is when we started that journey, and now we're running. We've had over 100 million orders placed in our cloud infrastructure just in the last month, and all of that is observability data is flowing through Grafana. So having good observability means that we understand all this new infrastructure that we stood up and that we're paying for, and that we are doing it in a cost-efficient way, that we're doing it in a secure way, a resilient way, slightly different, but ultimately that it is also performing it at the same or better levels than what we had on-prem, because our customers have very high expectations and they're only getting higher. So really having observability monitoring means that we have full, like a full picture of what our systems are doing at any moment, and we always know if there's a problem, when, where the problem is, when it happened, how it happened, and what we're going to do to remediate it or mitigate it in the future so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. So you started alluding to this a little bit. How do you guys think about measuring success? Like, what is we typically think of MTTR or incident resolution, but what are other metrics or other ways you think about measuring success of observability?
Yeah, no, I think, well, I always believe that you measure success when you're basically, your clients realize that you're actually offering a really great service. But no, internally, we definitely make sure that we understand, are we really getting the ability to catch alerts, do something with them that's really effective to be able to make sure we're operating our services that we have, make sure we are basically proactive. We talked about this, Neil and I. One of the biggest things is, I think we all know, especially when you're offering services to clients, is that you never want them to tell you they actually have a problem before you know it. So for us, success is we don't hear that. We really have to think every day, what can we do more and more to make sure if there's something that's going to impact the service you offer, that the observability is giving us the ability to catch it before our clients. So to me, that's like the number one thing. After that, you can do a lot of data metrics around capturing information, how many alerts you get, how many you really be able to respond to, how fast can you respond. We track it all, we measure it all, but my biggest thing is when I've had conversations with clients, they say, wow, you've gone from a place where, we had to contact you all the time to a place now we don't have to, you contact us, you're proactively communicating with us about what's going on, you make us aware there may be some impact, you're fixing the impact. That's, to me, the biggest measure that we have to make sure we're successful. And on the scale side, definitely, when we had to move from the old vendor we had to Grafana, we only had 6 months. Tremendous amount of data. Thousands of clusters of data. We had so many things we had to move so fast. During that transition, we had to make sure, again, that we were measuring basically the project itself, which was a huge project. So for us, really moving between the two, which some of you might do in your careers, if you're moving between two different providers, having that timeline, having that commitment, I could say that Grafana signed up with us to have the commitment to make that scale, make the thing move. And that was a big part of our success, was measuring basically that transition, how well we did it.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So yeah, I agree with all that. If you look at, you can look at it from two different perspectives, or at least I do. Quantitatively, you have your mean time to resolution, you have your ability to measure your SLOs and your your air budgets and how they're burning and all that kind of stuff, and we utilize all of that. From a different tack, though, I look at measuring the success of our observability also from the qualitative standpoint. We have seen a huge culture shift within our company as we've transitioned from what was largely a log-based observability platform to actually embracing open telemetry, using metrics and traces. And what we've noticed is that after some grumbling and some really tough conversations and a lot of onboarding, a lot of evangelizing, once people finally it started to click for folks, it kind of created this buzz within the company. And it's neat to see when somebody comes up with a new dashboard or a really slick way to do something that even some of our observability experts on my team haven't thought of yet, and they're then able to share that back to the rest of the organization, or come up with new ideas that we can pitch to Grafana, and working with them, from the CAB perspective, say, hey, we've got this great idea. We think it's great, at least. We would like to see this. How can we make this a feature within the platform? And we've had a couple of those already come through, and I think there's one more planned in the IRM space. So joining kind of the quantitative and the qualitative together, Frank mentioned, you never want your customer to call and say, hey, do you know that you're having a problem? Do you know that this service is down? Did you know that you're slow? When I said our customers have really high expectations and they're getting higher every day, our customers are monitoring us. They have observability about how we're doing. And it really is, a really tough phone call when they pick up the phone and say, hey, you guys are slow right now, and you didn't know it. But it wouldn't be uncommon for our customers to say, hey, you're over 300 milliseconds on your response time, you're slow. I mean, that's the type of responses that our customers are expecting. So being able to, I guess, feel how the conversations have shifted even with our customers as our observability has evolved has been a really big win for us. And that's a different way that we're looking at how successful we're being with our observability.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's never a great situation, right, where your customers know before you do, right?
Yeah.
Frank, can you double click a little bit into the proactive, preventative side? I think you have a interesting mantra you always say, right, when you in your meetings with your team.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's when I joined the company, and this is just the way I've always thought in my career, is coming into a company like Pega, who had not really been a cloud service, I know how to go. I had to be reactive right up front. So my whole thing about Journey to Scale was how do I move from reactive to and responsive to basically proactive and preemptive. And this was the shift I had to go through, and it's a journey I had to go on with the company, with my organization, as I set up the whole organization that did not exist, and making sure we understood the shift to this, right? And knowing it was going to be a journey we were on. And observability was going to play a big part, even though it wasn't the thing I initially focused on. It was definitely the part I knew would allow me to get to what I considered the real proactive and preemptive side, by really looking at how do we observe, how do we make sure we're aware of the things that have had trends and impacting us, and how we build any automation around making sure we can either auto recover or to make sure we have the ability to fail fast, whatever it was in a practice side. And everything we do internally when we're dealing with clients is, I've had this thing that goes on the bottom of every RCA, every single email when somebody tells me. So they're really great at telling me how what caused the problem. Everybody can tell you what caused the problem. The answer has to be, how do we make sure it never happens again? And when I sit down with my observability teams and they tell me, we're getting everything we need, we're seeing everything we need, all the indicators, all the alerts, I keep on saying, take a look at the data and tell me how you're going to reduce it all. How are you going to make sure you don't even need to get these alerts? So I push to the end to make sure we have the proactive and side of it, and then the preemptive side. Because for me, and again, the companies we deal with, which are the largest firms that deal with really critical information they're sharing and data that they use, we have to be in that proactive, preemptive. They don't want to go down. I mean, we get there's zero downtime, absolutely no downtime. Everything we built in automation, on the way we not only update all of our software. When we started, it was, if I touched anything, a database, if I touched any part of the infrastructure, we took downtime on everything. Every client, when I sat with them, I knew I had to present to them I was going to create no downtime. And be able to make that shift to no downtime, to be really proactive, was really what we had to do. And observability gave us the ability to understand, what is to happen? What is the change we made? Why did we make that change that had an impact, right? And how do we then observe, how do we make a change again, similar to that doesn't have an impact? So, it's really great to have a really talented, what I consider a real talented cloud ops team that really looks at how we're operating our service. But I challenge them every day to think about how do we make sure the things we do, the things that developers do, the things that we make changes to infrastructure do not impact our clients.
Yep, no, that's great. All right, Neil, so maybe we start with you on this one.
Okay.
One thing we were chatting through yesterday is the operational structure of your teams, the organization, right? So this whole shift from centralized to decentralized, what happens when you acquire a company and they come in. So walk us through a little bit of that journey. What have you learned along the way, and how are you guys currently set up?
Sure. Yeah, we were talking a little bit yesterday. It's like this centralized, decentralized. It's almost like a sine wave. Every 5 or 10 years, we collapse in everybody and then we pull them back out. What we have found, especially as we've made this transition to the cloud and the observability platform with Grafana, is that we take kind of a hybrid approach as far as how we structure our teams. So across Risk Solutions, we have a telemetry chapter that is really tasked with defining the patterns and practices, some of the architectural guidelines that we need to enforce, and really just trying to make a paved road for everybody all the other sub-companies or different areas within the larger risk solutions to align to. So we have an overarching centralized telemetry chapter. I'm a member of that. Within each of our individual markets, because really the way that we are set up is we align our business units to like insurance, healthcare, government, so on and so forth. Because our products, we work with 98% of the insurance companies in the US utilize our products. 9 out of the 10 biggest banks in the world. I mean, a lot of overlap in that respect with Frank and with Pega. So within our individual markets, then we have a central team, the one that I manage within insurance, that is responsible for executing on those paved roads that we have. And that means building tooling. It means doing a lot of training, upskilling, helping people with the transition to a new platform. But that ultimately, our individual product teams, our app developers, in many cases, our SREs are embedded within the application teams themselves that are responsible for the infrastructure for just this system. They're the ones that actually have to then go and implement the Grafana Alloy is something that we're moving to very soon. Updating which metrics we're going to be pushing across the board. I'm very excited about the Alloy Fleet Manager, by the way. I think it's going to solve some major hurdles that we've got right now. So in that way, we're decentralized. When we get down to the application level, our perspective is those teams know best what information is going to be important to the health, observing the health of their systems, but it's done with the kind of the guardrails that we've put in place and some of the modules that we've written, the tooling that has been put in place from a centralized perspective.
Great. What about you, Frank?
Yeah, and so I would say, originally when I was dealing with the reactive part, I had really the ops from an infrastructure perspective as one team trying to basically build what we need to be able to scale there, and then I have another team that deals with the outside. Since we're a platform and clients build their own apps on a platform, I had another team that we use a tool internally that we built to be able to basically manage the application side of it. Two separate organizations, engineering it, observing it, and everything else. With me moving out of Proactive, I put them under one group because I need to be able to get the correlation between the two now so I can really think about how I can become more proactive and preemptive. So from a company perspective, when I built out the groups, it was definitely two separate, but I knew there's a point I had to bring them together. But I had to let them mature to be able to bring them together, and now they're together and really mature, and they're really going towards that approach. The only thing that we talked about that's kind of decentralized is there were several acquisitions before I joined the company that basically the decision we made is to get all of this set up and then take those companies one at a time and figure out how we roll them into our overall architecture or strategy. And that's really where we are now, is that we'll take those kind of decentralized groups out there, and we have a playbook we'll run through on the things we need to change, and eventually we'll bring them into our overall observability model for Pega. And if we acquire a new company, we'll have the same kind of playbook where we'll bring them in a lot sooner than kind of waiting until we get the structure in place. But centralizing it for us has been the right thing because I want to move to that proactive and preemptive. And we do have, like I said, the infrastructure side and the app side really coming together to do that.
So just to add on to that, from the acquisition standpoint, because it made me think of something. He's exactly right. You bring in a new company, you acquire somebody, they become part of your group. We try to kind of leave them alone initially because you don't want to upend their world, and there's going to be some nervousness too if you're acquired by a larger company, and are they going to all those questions I'm sure many of us have had to deal with, myself included. I was originally part of ChoicePoint, which was then bought by LexisNexis. But what we're finding is that in many cases, we have differentiation in our tech stacks, which is usually not too bad. But the observability with it comes, they might have had a contract with, often it's been Datadog has been the one that we've seen most often. So one of the things that we are trying to take a focus on is where we can is now maybe being a little more proactive in bringing that slice of the acquisitions, bringing them into the Grafana contract. And that's where I think we're likely going to have some focus going forward. Because you can, as long as your systems are stable, it doesn't matter as much initially, to me at least, that you have differentiation between the groups. And really, you want people to have a little bit of agency in how they build their system. Grafana is a pretty good example of that. Loki team is different than Mimir, than Tempo and such. But I fundamentally believe that the more aligned you can get with your observability, at least getting everybody on OTel is going to be, it's going to make your life a lot easier, especially when you do that integration work, with, like an acquisition and such.
Yeah, so Neil, we both done this now, where we tried to build observability for scale. I mean, I'm sure we both have experience of the pitfalls and challenges and things we might have done
Yeah, a few
maybe
things,
a little bit
yeah.
differently. So what have you thought about maybe in that context of, what would you have done maybe a little bit differently if you had the opportunity to start all over again?
Oh boy. So we started, the transition to Grafana 18 months ago. We got our production. We have to self-host our logs, by the way. So we're hosting Grafana Enterprise logs within our own Kubernetes clusters, but then we use all the SaaS services for Grafana, just for context. So we had a lot of learnings just running Loki at the scale that we run it, and Grafana was a really good partner in that. So we started with using Redis cache as our backend because it was quick to stand up through Azure, but do it again, we would have more quickly moved to Memcache as our, essentially our fast cache. But really, some of the pitfalls that we ran into would have gotten started sooner with just helping people understand as they transition from using just logs to what does cardinality actually mean. It's some of the basics that, even though we thought we were doing a pretty good job, still we found that there were some issues with really trying to quantify how many metrics are we going to need, having our teams understand what certain decisions like putting the pod name inside of a metric is actually going to do to you, and the problems it's going to cause. But one really good example I can give you, unrelated to that, as we started onboarding more and more of our users into the Grafana UI, we realized that we were using the basic roles within Grafana, viewer, editor, very small number of admins. We had far too many people with either the editor access or for what we were doing, the editor role was too permissive. So we ended up having a problem where people's dashboards would go missing because somebody else deleted it, not thinking that they were doing anything wrong. So we would have gotten ahead of implementing custom roles for all of our teams. And we've done that. We have everything that we do is as code. So we are able to build that into our provisioning system that, our configuration of our users are as code, our dashboards are as code, our alerts are as code. Everything is provisioned through the Grafana APIs. And some of that stuff I think we would have gotten even further ahead of had we known now what we know now. But beyond that, I think another big challenge we had is dashboard sprawl, right? Hundreds of dashboards, thousands of dashboards, version 1, version 2, version 3 showing up in the same folder, people forking each other's dashboards, which isn't inherently bad, but there's no reason I needed to see 3 copies of Grafana's own Kubernetes dashboard, showing up. Trying to get a better handle on that maybe would have been good. I think one really true, and I'll pause here after this, getting our labeling strategy dialed in even better than we did for our logs and our metrics, as well as our attribute naming, would have been would have been very helpful. We had set from the get-go, these are the labels that you shall apply to all of your logs. There's a point of diminishing returns with how many labels you put on some of this stuff. What we found is that went okay, but we weren't we would have been a little bit more strict about making sure that people were using the labels that we had set up, the values that we had defined for things like level, info warn. I saw 3 or 4 different ways of spelling the word error for some reason. I mean, and hopefully this resonates with some of you guys. It's not that we didn't know how to find it but we didn't even realize that was a blind spot for us, that this was going to be a problem that was going to cause so much grief. And once you're deployed at scale, making changes quickly, coming back to the fleet manager thing, that's where it's become a little bit of a challenge for us as we're now going back and taking kind of a round 2 approach of cleaning up our labels, cleaning up our values. We have everything we need, but we've had to make some really interesting links within the data sources to correlate our logs to our metrics, to our traces, and back again. So,
Great, thanks for sharing. Yeah, all right, so I'm gonna turn it over to some audience questions, so thanks everyone for submitting these. We talked a little bit about now that you're implemented, right? You've got all these tools, these services available for your different teams in your organizations. There's a couple questions around this theme of, well, how do you get people to, A, learn about it and start using it? So any guidance for the group here around education, around training, around just getting people to start using some of these tools and services?
Well, yeah, from my perspective, of course, from my ops teams, my observability teams internally from an operations perspective, I mean, they all had to be enabled, so that was their job. I mean, really the biggest part was trying to get the product engineering teams building the product side of it, that they knew they would have to use basically the tool themselves, understand how they were building their code and how it's going to affect the overall operability of our service was probably the biggest challenge. So getting them the training we needed. Once we got them the training, it was pretty much, we do a lot of mandatory training for our engineers. But for us, it was, and one of the things we had to do was really, it was a real mind transformation from how they thought about building code that was going to get deployed by a client on-prem versus us building code that we had to operate, and really trying to make sure that they were trained in the ability to understand what did we need to observe by bringing them on board. So we built it into our service lifecycle early on for them to understand they had to be part of their process, how to be able to understand observability, what they were doing, how they build the code, how it was going to change, and basically the things we needed to alert on. So, from our perspective, I mean, we really wanted to make sure everybody got trained. Mandatory training was really required. And also I think because we weren't on-prem, the cloud, we really spent a lot more time with our product engineering groups, really making sure they understand the value of observability. So, and then the dashboard crawl, because once they got it, they realized they had to do this. I mean, it was literally at a point where I was like, how many dashboards we have? That's a blind spot.
How can you find anything?
Yeah,
right?
we didn't even know it was happening. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, we had like hundreds and hundreds of dashboards for like common teams, and that's the one thing that we realized we wish we would have done a little bit differently early on. So if that's a lesson learned, I would say that.
Yeah. Remind me the question. Sorry. Can you?
Yeah. So how do you get people in your organizations to adopt the tools, to educate them, to just having them start using it?
Yeah. So. I've had a lot of conversations just during this conference with a couple of the Grafana folks that have been really encouraging. So Grafana's been really good about when we tell them we have a need to get some training, get a lunch and learn, that kind of thing, bringing somebody in and having that. But one of the conversations I've been having around with some of your folks is how can we formalize that a little bit more? And I've heard some really, I don't want to share anything I'm not supposed to, but I've very positive plans it sounds like you guys have in the works for better training, more hands-on labs, that type of thing. Internally though, we had kind of an interesting situation with everybody being so used to using logs, right? And so if anybody's used like an Elk Stack type of thing as their backend, that was one of the things we were moving from. And so if you're going to try to query Loki for 30 days, like doing a wildcard search, you're probably not going to have a good time. But it's not meant. I mean, it's not meant to do that. So a lot of it was trying to help bridge those gaps. It was a lot of our team members, becoming the experts first and putting into place. Here's the 3 things you need to learn about. So we had a weekly meeting where we had 200 people on the phone call where we went over. Here's what traces are. Here's which are quite excellent, and they're, I think, the best tool in the kit. Here's what a metric is and why you should care, and there's different types of metrics. Here's why doing count over time on logs. Yeah, it does give you a number, but there's a better way to do that. So we spend a lot of time having these types of formal. We're going to take one topic, we're going to put some process around it, and then we're going to share it back out to the rest of our organization, the rest of our community. We also had pockets of user groups kind of getting stood up to help each other learn. So we had, I think they called it like like the Grafana Club, kind of like the Breakfast Club a little bit.
Yeah.
Like one of my directs would, and I didn't know he was even doing it at the time. He had set up a small group where they would meet once a week and just show each other what they were doing. Ken's his name. Ken set this up proactively, and it was really successful. And that's something that we're now going to be formalizing because we're in the cloud, we're running at a very high scale now. But there's a lot of things, we're in like the day 2 operations mode, and there's so many things now that we're going to be working on. And I think formalizing some of those continual education types of opportunities are going to be where we're at.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, take advantage of some of the resources we have for you as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so another theme I'm seeing in some of these questions is circling back to some of the shift from the previous vendors that you have, whether it's through acquisition or whether it's the actual journey you went on with us. Maybe I'll start with you, Frank. So one question here is around, switching can be a pretty big effort, and how did you manage that migration? What advice do you have for the group here in terms of, how to make that smoother?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've done quite a bit of that in my career, but I have to say when we, decided on Grafana and met with the team and we said we wanted to make sure we had a joint team, we had literally daily stand-ups between the teams. We had a very short time frame to get onto Grafana, so we really had to make sure we had the teams working together, everybody raising the blockers. We have a concept of program management within my organization where they basically really work after in a concept of making sure a program gets completed. We treat this like a program, all executive level. It was raised to me. I had my weekly meetings to make sure everything was going on track. But Grafana was there with us every single day on this critical transformation we're going through, because there was a lot we were doing to not only make sure that we had parity with what we had, but also we had the ability to make sure we could not miss on the day we switched from observing our services. So for us, in the work we put into it and the effort, and Grafana stood up at the table with us as a real partner to make sure every single day, if we needed anything, training, education, we needed some way to configure something differently, they were with us every single day along the way over that 6-month journey to really deliver it. And it really was an amazing thing to see my team and Grafana work so close. Today's relationships that we have with the Grafana people we work with is exceptional. It's like you wouldn't even know we're 2 different companies at the end of the day, the way we work together, which is fantastic. So,
It's great to hear.
Yeah. A pretty similar experience. Grafana they didn't pay us to say any of this, by the way. I mean, Grafana really was a partner with us as we moved so we've had migrations from Datadog. One of them is just wrapping up with a company of ours called Cerium. So if anybody flew here, they're a company that works with flight data. Or we've moved from Elastic, like an Elk Stack type of stuff. I don't remember if we end up making transition from New Relic, but so somewhere in between, we've had experience with moving from a lot of these vendors over. Grafana has been really the key to helping show us the way to do it, because you guys have had a focus on that during this conference. Even I've noticed. So really, it's been a lot of partnership with them. One of the specific examples I can give is we have. Coming from a very log-centric type of observability platform with Elk, which you can do metrics and all those other things too, but we're mostly using it for logs. We ended up having Grafana come and take a look at some of these queries that our teams that were still getting used to LogQL were just really non-performant. We were able to, their pro services group was able to take a look at these queries and then really come up with a guide to say, I see what you're trying to do here, but if you do these 3 things as a pattern across, it was able to increase, or I guess reduce how long some of these queries would run from like 30 seconds down to, sub-second in some cases. So we really relied heavily on Grafana to help us make that transition, and it went really well.
Great. No, thanks for sharing. All right, so I think going back a little bit to the kind of the alert fatigue and dashboard sprawl and all the stuff that's out there, any guidance or any advice that you can share around just how to manage, like how much is enough observability? Do you get some level of diminishing return? How much is like too much?
I mean, you should never have an alert that's not actionable, right? So if you're getting an alert and people say, oh, that happens all the time, you can ignore it, then you have to ask yourself the question, like, why do I have this in place to begin with, right? Early on, so the way that we actually approached this dashboard sprawl kind of problem, at least for what we need at the time, we were making these big flips from on-prem to the cloud all at once. So we're moving all of our services over. And we had 200 people on these phone calls all trying to find information. We put together like a dashboard of dashboards, kind of like a little bit of a meta thing, where we had all the most important dashboards from these various groups that were involved in these big flips in one spot. And it seems kind of basic and obvious, but that helped us quite a bit to keep ourselves organized. So people didn't have to ask, can you send me a link to this dashboard? They just went to this one central place. What I'm really excited about, though, is we've, kind of like BlackRock, we've been able to get in a preview for certs, and I really fundamentally think that that's going to change the way that we operate, and we're most of the way onboarded in like a dev environment. It's going to be really cool. So I'm really looking at the problem of like dashboard sprawl and such being solved in a different way, where we're going to be writing less dashboards and utilizing some of the out-of-the-box, the app experiences you guys are putting together have been really excellent. The Kubernetes one's really cool. I'm hoping that we utilize more of that so that we have the only dashboards we're going to be creating are things that we'll be utilizing for specific customers, specific types of orders, but not from the infrastructure standpoint, putting all that away.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, alerts, alert junkies and ticket junkies, as I've said to my organization, you want everything, but when you really have to get down, and I guess for me, thinking about moving to correlation and being able to be really proactive eliminates the noise. Because you really have to know the content that's really meaningful to be able to do the correlations that allow you to drive towards proactive. So everybody wants them in the beginning. You got to then, go through, which is what we did, to definitely reduce the noise and then really build on top of it to get the real value out of observability.
Yep, great. All right, I think we are just about out of time here. Any one word of advice or one thing you'd like to leave the audience with here?
Oh boy. I think the more that you can standardize, if you are at the point where you're going to start making a transition to a new service in Grafana or away from a different vendor to them, getting your baseline data as clean as you can early is going to make such a huge difference. If you can standardize, and I mentioned this earlier, standardize on your label values, stuff that's maybe not out of the box there for you, it's just going to make life a lot simpler for you. And really be very particular when people say, well, can't I just send this thing instead? Like, no, you can't. Like, put some guardrails in place, because it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't have clean data, transforming it later is possible, but it's so much more effort than it needs to be.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when I had the Grafana team early on, I said, look, tell us what we shouldn't do. That was the biggest thing. I said, you work with all these clients. Please don't let me make those mistakes, right? And that's really what I challenged them to come to my meetings and say, don't do it this way, do it that way. And that's really what I wanted out of a real partnership. Because I look at Grafana as an extension of my organization, and having that ability to say, you're doing it the wrong way, was really critical for me and my organization. Even though we had used observability tools in the past, even though we had some really talented people, look, you are somebody that I want you to have that confidence that you could tell me and my organization, don't do it that way. Yep. That was the biggest thing for us.
Great. All right, well, thanks you guys for sharing your insights. Audience, thanks for the questions. Neil and Frank, they'll be around, so grab them. If we didn't get to some of your questions, I'm sure if you come up to them, they can talk to you about that. So again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Let's give them a round of applause.